I think that does affect our evening services a little bit, since the seminar that we have in financial peace, what is it, about a 2-hour seminar? It's quite a lot of work. Does Summit have a focus? Just think back in your life. Those of you who have been in this life for a few years, think of the great things you've accomplished, the best thing you've ever accomplished. And then think back on whether that just happened accidentally. Now, some of you might say, yes, it happened accidentally, but most of you will say, no, it did not happen accidentally. There was a lot of forethought. There was a lot of hard work involved. And so when we look at our congregation, we say, you know what, we'd really like to grow as a congregation. What we need to ask ourselves is, do we have a focus point? Because if we don't have a focus point, if we don't all have one thing that we hold as the most important thing in our congregation's life, then we won't get there. And so this is sort of a stimulus to get you thinking about a focus point. Now, I started off with that picture because for some of you, you might think, that's the focus point. And that's not the focus point. That's just a building that indicates where we are and where we worship. And it's something we put out to the community. We try to brand ourselves to the community with things like this so that we can become well known. And that's just because of our location and the amount of cars that goes by the building. But if we were in a neighborhood, that would not be important at all. We would have a different focus. So that shouldn't be our focus. So what is our focus? What is the main thing? So here are some statistics to show you how different people view religion. So how do people pass on their beliefs and traditions from one generation to the next? You'll see that there is, in the 1970s, what it was compared to the 2005, and you'll see how religion of the parent and the child was passed on. And you will see which one is growing the most. You'll see the second one that is kind of growing, and then you'll see the others that are failing. So the evangelical Protestants, the Church of Christ would be lumped in with evangelical Protestants in a generalized church growth Christian study. You could see the mainline Protestants. You can see that they are declining, pretty fast, right? The evangelicals are not declining that fast. The Catholics, you can see they've really declined fast, almost half. Also the Jewish, you see that they haven't declined much at all, right? So you've got to ask yourself, why? And then the Mormons have actually grown. Why? And then those who say they have no religious affiliation have also grown quite a bit. So those are very interesting statistics, but more interesting is the reasoning that goes behind it, are the conclusions that you make. And so these are questions. I've not given any opinions yet. I haven't given you any clue as to what I think is going on there. And all of us are seeing this information, and we all have brains, and we should all be thinking and asking questions when we see things like this. So this is based on a sample of 360 families out of Southern California. Do you think that influences it? Yeah, that can influence it, right? I would have preferred it to be across America, specifically included Tennessee a little bit. But that is a good study, and that's the only one that we have to look at the moment when it comes to this. So here is the hint, the link, and the think. And I think my hint might kind of curve you away from what is actually going on. So why is the cult doing so much better than everyone else? Okay? Why is the Mormon church doing so much better than the others? Why is the Jewish, because you see the Mormons actually growing, why are the Jewish religion, why do they fall the least? Right? So how important is genealogy to the first two? How important is genealogy to the one that's actually growing, which is the Mormon church? And how important is genealogy to the Jewish church or synagogues? Do you think that's important to them? Do you think Mormonism genealogy is important to Mormonism? You better believe it is. It's the key. If you send away for a genealogical study right now, you don't know who you're actually sending to. You're sending to the Mormon church. And they do the genealogy study for you. They're the leaders in anything to do with genealogy. So, next question. What is genealogy? It's where we come from. So, where do you come from as a Christian? Who baptized you? Who baptized that person? Who baptized that person? On what day were you baptized? Going all the way back to the first church and who baptized who back then. And we're thinking about when people became Christians and how they became Christians. And do your children know how you became a Christian? Do they know who baptized them? Is that important? Will they tell that to their children? And so on. So there's the link. How important was genealogy to the Old Testament families? Was it important? You try starting the Gospels without reading about the genealogies and you're going to have a hard problem, both in Matthew and Luke. You won't get anywhere because Matthew and Luke are going to make sure that you understand the importance of genealogies. You look at genealogies in the Old Testament and if you've got one of those Bible apps like I do, you put it on twice the normal speed. You don't set it to one because it's just name after name after name after name. I don't skip it, but I sure don't spend a lot of time with it. Yet, there seems to be something in these genealogies that I might be missing, that we might all be missing. Why was it so important? Right? And then think, is there any action required? How are we doing in genealogies? How are we doing? How many of you love to talk to couples and then you ask them, how did you guys first meet? Anybody like to do that? And you hear these stories, right? Isn't that great, right? How did you? And then they tell you this and it's all nice and but a better question would be, how did you all become Christians? Right? That would be a better question. So, to engage here a little bit, to get a little bit deeper into this topic, Barna research, only 1 out of every 5 parents of children under 13 has been contacted by a spiritual leader in the church to talk about their child's spiritual life. So, Barna is a religious, a very broad religious study on families and Christianity, and they say only 1 out of 5 parents have ever been contacted and asked anything about their children's spiritual lives. So we're asking ourselves, any action required? So I think there's action required here. Do we have enough activities with families? Let me just start with that question. This is a bad time of the year to ask that question because the answer is yes. But all through the year, do we have enough? We've had so many meals and in people's homes, and we've had the summer servants, all of that whole program. We've had a lot of things. I think we could have maybe done more, though, and I would really like us, if we don't by the time that summer comes, if we don't yet have a youth minister, I really would like us to have an intern. Preferably 1 male and 1 female intern. I really would like to see that. Because that is when people become Christians. Most people become Christians before they're 18. And so, Bill, we can continue to having classes and studies, right? But maybe we need to get some young people also helping with those classes. Bill does a lot, and so he can understand where I'm coming from. Also, explaining how this works, many parents don't realize how to pass on their faith and their values to their kids. So here's an acronym, AROMA. You can use a lot of different things: affection, respect, order, merriment. Home must not just be a hard place; it must also be a bit of a fun place. Order. God is not the author of confusion, but the God of order. And so there has to be order in the home. Darwin and I held respect as a very important one. Nothing happens if there's no respect in the home. And then affirmation and affection as the block ends of those two is really important. And then create a loving environment in which you can discuss God and faith at any time. What else can you put down there? How else can we help kids to get to know their parents' faith and values. I think we need to talk amongst each other more about this. About 8 years ago, when I was here at Summit in the early days, I remember parents having meetings, teen parents having meetings. We still had a teen in our home, so maybe it's still going on. If it is, very good, but if it's not, you need to get together as parents and talk about these things, help each other out. What is working 20 years ago when and 10 years ago when I had kids in the home will not be working today. Things keep changing. So it's all about passing on our faith. And then also equipping. Barna again reports that parents are not so unwilling to provide more substance or the support. They just need help with this. They're ill-equipped. So teachers, if you teach a lesson, give homework to those children. Especially talk to the parents and ask the parents to get some feedback going so that the lessons can go out and they're not just stuck here. There's also a lot of really good material that you can have for family studies on any topic. So if you find out what your kids are learning in Sunday school, you can do your own research to go more out on this. So one of the examples in what type of an example are we as parents to our children is the RP2SA. We did that for a semester and it was really effective here, and so I've kept on doing it. Are you reading your Bible every day? Are you praying every day? Are you busy with 2 hours at least of service in the community or with this congregation? And S, self-discipline goals and attending services. So if you had to rate yourself as to 1 is bad, 5 is moderate, 10 is great, where would you rate yourself? And do we ever stop being an example? No, we're never going to stop ever being an example. Somebody's always looking. Jeff Schaefer challenged us this morning in a Bible class that somebody's always looking. So be aware of that. And then we haven't gotten to the lesson yet, by the way. We're getting ready to get into the lesson. And then we also need some encouragement. Do you share enough tips, strategies, and stories about being great parents? So we've covered that a little bit. So we get ready to get into the lesson. The focus point of Summit. What is a focus point of Summit? And this is where I think it is. If you had to explain 4 facts about the gospel to someone, what would it be? Could you right now tell somebody 4 things about the gospel? I know we could do 3, because I train you all quite often with 3. Okay, church, what is the DBR, right? It's the same as BCV. We've done that many times. So let's try this. What does D stand for? And B? And R? So that's a good one, right? Death, burial, and resurrection. So we got 3, but can we do 4? And maybe a little bit more than that. So here is the focal point. If you have your Bibles open to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, I will have it in the ESV behind me, 1 Corinthians 15. And this is really easy. You'll see that what he'll do is he's going to tell you in verse 1 and 2 that this is essential. Then he's going to go into verse 3 and 4 and he's going to explain it to you. And then verses 5 through 7, he will establish it. You can't miss it. I mean, this is not my outline. This is Paul the Apostle's outline. And he starts off and he says this first thing about knowing the focal point of a congregation. It is essential that you know it. I love it when the Bible actually spoon feeds us and we don't have to guess. So here it goes. And I have spoon fed you. See, I broke it up a little bit so it'll look easier. Now I remind you, brothers, of the gospel. So the topic is the gospel, and he's going to bring it to your memory. Let me just tell you right off here that what he's talking of is what is of first importance. It doesn't mean that the rest of the New Testament or the rest of the things we do is not important. He says this just has to be number 1. So is singing important or is it not important? It's important, right? Do you think God will be happy with us if we stop singing? No, not at all, right? So we're not talking about that. So please don't hear me saying what are salvation issues and what's not salvation. No, he's not doing that. He's just saying, guys, if you're going to grow, if you're going to be the church God wants you to be, the most important thing, and I'll get back to that original question. If you're going to achieve something substantial in your life, it's not going to happen by accident. It's because you planned it. So this has to be something you plan. We have to be purposeful about this. Now, I remind you, brothers, of the gospel. I preach to you, right? This is something that they didn't just get, but Paul preached this. Paul says in Galatians 1, 8 and 9, though we preach to you any other gospel than the one you received, let me see. If you receive any other gospel than the one we preached to you, the one we originally preached to you, then you are accursed. And he repeats it. So we have to stick to this one gospel. I preached to you, in which you received, and in which you stand. Now, how did you receive the gospel? How do you receive the gospel? Do you just receive it in your heart? Is it just something that will come to you by osmosis? No, it's going to be the death, burial, resurrection. We're going to get there, right? But people will look at this one verse and they will take it out of context. They won't keep reading and they will miss eternity because of that. In which you stand. So the gospel, Jesus said, unless you're born again of the water and spirit, you shall not see or enter the kingdom of heaven. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. The like figure that are saved, even baptism, not the calling, not the cleansing of the filth of flesh, but the calling to God. And we can keep on going on with those scriptures. That is what the gospel is. That is what you receive. That is on which you stand. So the questions that I have to ask you, if you're going to do this with a genealogy, if you're going to do this where you're passing it on, people around you need to know this about you. They need to know who preached the gospel to you. So who preached the gospel to you? Why is this important? Hint, genealogy, right? That's why it's important. We have to be, we're a living congregation. We're living stones. We need to keep passing that on. And do you know the date when you received it? Are you standing firm in it? Yes or no? So those are pretty obvious questions. You can answer those questions. And by which you are being saved, right? You are being saved. There's a condition here. If you hold fast to the word I preached, if you hold fast to the word I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. So how important, what is the condition? You are saved if you hold fast to it, right? That's the condition. And so we need to be unwavering in our belief. We need to separate ourselves from the worldly philosophies and thinking patterns. We need to choose to do what is right. That's a daily choice. It's not a sickness. It's a choice. You all know what I mean when I say it's not a sickness. If you read the article, you'd know what I'm talking about. Is addiction a disease, or is it a sickness, or is it a sin? It starts off as a choice. If you keep on with it, it's going to become a disease. Why? Because it'll affect everything. It'll affect your kidneys. It'll affect your liver. But it's always a choice. People never quit an addiction unless they choose to stop. So we need to separate ourselves from the world. We need to choose to do what is right. We need to obey what God said in His Word. And we need to love through action the least of these. And that means Matthew chapter 25, the judgment scene. So those are the beliefs in which we stand firm. If this is it, basically right here. There's not one bit of this that has passed away. We need to hold on to this whole testimony that we have, specifically the New Testament as it amplifies the Old. So that is what the gospel is, and we can see that it is essential. I remind you, you're being saved, and he says, I remind you, which I preach, and which you, now I remind you, brothers, which I preach, the gospel which I preach to you, which you received, and which you stand, by which you are being saved, if you hold fast to the word which I preach to you, unless you believed in vain. These are essential elements. They're not it's not a if. Yes, there is a condition in it, but you have to obey that condition. And then here comes the focal point. Now he's going to tell us exactly what it is. For I delivered to you as of what, church? I delivered to you as of first importance. So how many things are there in the New Testament? How many ideas? How many things are there that we have to obey? Lots, right? But this is of first importance. So somebody asks you, what is the mission of the church? What is the thing that you all hold as of first importance? This needs to be it, because we're given it like that. That which I also received, that Christ, number one, died, right? Say it with me, church. Number one, Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures. It was prophesied that he would die. That he was, number two, buried. And that he was, number three, raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, just as it was prophesied. All right, so there it is. What is the DBR? Death, burial, and resurrection. This is something that we repeat. I've repeated this more than anything else since I've been here. Why? Because it is essential. It is something that we have to understand. So here is how the DBR focuses into our life. There's the death, there's the burial, and the resurrection, and then you'll see there's a new life, and there's scriptures along with all of that. You can see what happens in the texts. If you look at those texts, from what book of the Bible do all of those texts come from? Acts. And how many conversion cases are there? No? Are there 10? How many is there? What's that? 10? Dwayne's right. I always thought there were 9. You must be right. Yep, there's 10. Okay. What happens every time? Every time, is there a teacher? Yes, there's one time that's implied though, right? Okay. Every time, is there belief? Or are there sometimes is the belief implied? The belief is implied many times, right? Okay, is there confession every time? Or is the confession implied most of the time? It's implied, right? And the one time that it's actually there, that's a spurious text. All right? How about repenting? Do we repent every time? Or is it sometimes implied? Sometimes implied. So what is there every time? Baptism, right? Why? It's just of first importance. It's important. That's why. These other things, you can make the conclusion, you can deduce it, but you can get it from other scriptures. But when it comes to baptism, when it comes to the book of Acts, which is the history of the church, it's every time. Now, church, let me tell you the difference between Acts and the epistles, and Revelation, for that matter. You have history being recorded in Acts. You get that? The epistles, you can make conclusions, you can have theological statements on them, but Acts is a whole bunch of examples. And it's very hard to contradict somebody when they give you an example. For instance, there's a whole big theological debate of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verses 3 and 5. And Jesus says in verse 3 and 5, you need to be born again to see the kingdom of heaven. Nicodemus, how? He explains it. You need to be born again, or born of the, what? 2 things. Water and spirit. You know what the question is? The big question that denominations have on that verse? Where is the water? In 1 John chapter 3. I don't know how they can ask that question, because I read it. It's verse 5, right? It's there. But they can argue about it. But you can't argue about that, about the book of Acts. That's why it's so very, very powerful. All right, some questions coming out of that. So what are our first important items regarding our faith? Death, burial, and resurrection, right? Does that make the other things not important? Absolutely not. No. I hope you all understand that. What things seem to be are first importance in some of the churches you have visited in the past. Okay? You come to another congregation, right? Could be a Church of Christ, could be any congregation. You walk in and you look, right? When it's a strange place, you look. You see the entrance hall, you see the auditorium, you see a welcome center, you may see some flowers, but you're looking, right? You're looking. One of the things that I do when it's not a Church of Christ is I take all the little pamphlets that I can see. Wherever they are, and I put them in my pocket. And when I get a chance, I go through all of them. Also, you can look at the back of the songbooks, and you can see things listed. In what ways did these churches lead you to think those things were so important to the people there? You know, some of the churches that I really like, you walk up to their building, and as you're walking up to the door, they open the door and they greet you, you know. Sharon, I think that church in Florida, in Naples, right? You walk there, and as you're trying to go to the door, and they're already opening up the door, and they big smile, and then they hand you a bulletin, and it's really nice. So why do churches struggle to keep priorities as that are consistent with the text? Now, there's a big elephant in the room, a question that I never asked. You all know what that question is? What do we do? How do we show people what is as of first importance? What do we use to indicate this? So keep that in mind. And we're a pretty friendly congregation, very moldable, and we will move, we will change, we'll do what we need to change. All right, so once we have the essential point established, this is of first importance, and then we have it explained, which is the death, burial, and resurrection, and then we have it established. And so look at how he establishes this. I really like this, verse 5, 6, and 7. So that he appeared to Cephas, that's Simon Peter, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. This is Jesus after he died, after he was buried, and after he resurrected. He appears to all these people. And how important do you think this testimony is? What happens if it was a lie? Would we know about it today? Those people who were alive, would they have said anything? Yeah, they would have said, yes, we were there, it didn't happen, and so on. So, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. Most of them who are still alive, some have fallen asleep, some have passed on. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. So, what must Summit do to be known as of first importance congregation? In other words, a death, burial, and resurrection. What do you all suggest? What should we do? First of all, is it important? Is it important that we become known as a congregation like this? Yes, I think it is. So then are we? If our visitors who are here with us today, and they're not visitors, you're all first time, right? Really appreciate you being back tonight. If they didn't notice that we were a death, burial, and resurrection congregation, then we're doing something wrong. Then we need to adjust. All right. And then how will this prevent us getting distracted with sideline issues? If you have achieved anything really important in your life, it's because you didn't get sidetracked, because you had a goal, you were focused, and that's why you achieved it. And so you must be focused, and then don't get distracted. Same with us. If we are a death, burial, and resurrection church, in other words, if we are as a first of importance church, then we will not get distracted with sideline issues. So do we use our time, talents, and treasures to confirm that we are a death, burial, and resurrection church? Are we passing the death, burial, and resurrection legacy? Do our children know this? Are they going to pass it on to their children? And how will you make sure that you're remembered in his death, burial, and resurrection way? Those are important questions. We need to figure it out, right? Ken, we're aging, right? And eventually we're going to be passing from this world. And we need to make sure that our families know that we were death, burial, and resurrection Christians. We need to make sure. There are ways of doing that. And I think we need to think about it. So this is what I came up with this week. I took about an hour, maybe less. And I know that I don't have the software to make it really nice. Laura has really good software. She could have done this so much better. But this is what our focus needs to be. Not the building on the top, but this in the middle. Death, burial, and resurrection. Do you think the world gets how important this is? When you go out to a graveyard, what is the one thing you see more than anything else? What's that? You see graves. Very good. Thank you, Ms. Yvonne. Way to make me look stupid. Okay, I'll give you a hint. You see any of those? Why is it when people leave this world, they want to have a cross on their grave? Why do they want to be known as a death, burial, and resurrection Christian when they leave this world, but when they're in the world, they don't care? You see? It's a very obvious thing. When I go into any graveyard, I see that symbol more than any other symbol. But I don't think we need to wait till we're dead. I think we need to do it here when we're alive. Some of the ideas, one idea I can think of is taking this picture, and I can send it out again, maybe send it to Laura to ask her to tweak it a little bit, make it look a little bit prettier, but put it on our profile, those of you who have Facebook. We can have it on our newsletter. We can put a little tiny image of this on everything that we publish, everything we put out. Does that make sense to you as a church? I think when people come into those doors, they need to know that we are and as of first importance congregation. Well, this is the time for our invitation, and the invitation is really obvious. We are a death, burial, and resurrection church because that is who Christ is. And He said you need to die with Him, you need to be buried with Him, and you need to resurrect with Him. And the way you do that is in this world. You die with Him in baptism, you are buried with Him in baptism, and you resurrect from the baptistry to walk that new life that we showed in just a little while ago. If you haven't done that yet, then this has to be done today. There is no other time. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. Our life is but like a vapor. It's here and then it's gone. Also, if we haven't done what we should, if we haven't lived the type of life that we should live, then this is the time for us to realign our life. If you've been living your life by just going through the motions as far as what we believe is important, and you haven't really exemplified that, if your friends around you, your family around you, don't know what your legacy is, and you need the prayers of the church to realign that, we will pray with you today. Whatever your need is, please come forward right now as together we stand and sing.